All right, welcome back to the channel. So Gervonta, Tank Davis, Errol Spence have been disrespected by Jake Paul, who says that he is a bigger star than both of them. At least that's what he implies. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. Before I get into the subject matter of the video, though, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. It goes a long way towards growing the channel. It'll be much appreciated. Okay, so Jake Paul has arrived and is a big star in the sport of boxing from what it looks like. And I'm telling you, man, it is apt to me. I find it absolutely hilarious that somebody could come out from YouTube and become such a star in the sport, create such a buzz that he's actually having his own pay-per-view shows on Showtime. However, at a certain point in time, we've got to really stop, the madness when we start comparing, or like what he did, which he said is he thinks that he is the first or second most, biggest guy in boxing. He's the biggest, the biggest name in boxing. At a certain point in time, we've got to really separate, the hype from from the reality of it, man. And now I'm not totally against all of this stuff that's going on with the celebrity fights and the YouTube fights, because, if anything is out there in the world that people can have fun and get them distracted from, the lives that they live with all the pressure out there in the world, I'm in favor of it. I don't want to be, seem as if I'm some, just stodgy old man that doesn't, want anything to change, right? And, just because Jake Paul is not really a boxer, like a professional boxer, it's not like I don't want people to have fun and have something to watch. We all need that. And if Jake Paul can succeed in the way that he succeeds, I'm 100% in favor of him succeeding, in his life, right? Same thing for Tyron Woodley. If he can make some money coming in and fighting, that's a good thing. You also had a lot of good things that went on in the card with, Daniel Dubois coming to the United States, the Serrano, Amanda Serrano, co-headline. I think she might have been the co-headliner for that event, and her getting a payday and getting noticed. It's not like, Jake Paul has been doing this in a vacuum and not been including real boxers. So, there's really are some really bright things to say about, about what he's doing. However, there's a certain point, I think, where you start to go overboard, and that's when you start, comparing yourself, to the actual guys that are really making the sport of boxing, the sport that it is, which are the real boxers. So it kind of got under my skin a little bit when Jake Paul said he thinks he's the first or second biggest star in boxing. And he said, I don't know. Look at the numbers. I probably, but because here's the thing, man. Jake Paul is not boxing. I mean, Jake Paul is holding amateur fights, with basically an amateur fight, where you're selling a lot of tickets and you have a big event around it. But that's what it is. It's a big event. It's not really, a boxing. It's not really a boxing match. And, I don't want to, really, I don't want to put any ill will towards him or whatever, or the reason why, he's being successful. But there used to be this thing in like the turn of the century where they would call him, a great white hype. And it is the hope that, that somebody that was a white kid that could be charismatic, could bring a lot of, and could be the champion for them and create a big buzz. And, and that was what was around, when they would have, guys, who was the original one? I can't remember the name of the original one, but it was Jess Willard was one of the original ones to come back and beat Jack Johnson, right? So you had these secondary fighters who would come around and who would try to take control of boxing from, within the ring, and they would be the great white hype, like Jerry Cooney during the time when Larry Holmes was fighting was the great white hype at the time, right? Then this is not something that a term that I'm putting out there. This is the term that was actually used in the newspapers, because of the domination of that was taking place with black fighters. Well, this to me with Jake Paul seems similar to that, because it is a way for people to get excited behind this guy, even though he clearly does not have the talent or, or the skill, really to survive in a ring with real fighters. So, when he says that he's the biggest fighter in boxing, I'm like, you're not really in boxing. You're in a sideshow, which is, a sideshow event, like a specialty event that is supposed to be like boxing, but is really operating like pretty much like exhibitions. Because in like the early part of boxing, when boxing was illegal and guys would, have the real fights way far away from cities, they would actually make most of their money going around, or a large amount of money going around reenacting those fights in what they would call exhibition fights, right? So what Jake Paul is participating in is a big exhibition fight. But even if you look at it, I would be very surprised though, even if you did really look at his numbers, if he wound up being, the biggest fight, the biggest fighter in boxing. But, I will tell you that it does say a lot about how big he is, because that was, it was, like I said, it was a pay-per-view event. I wouldn't be surprised if it sold 100,000 pay-per-view tickets. I wouldn't be the prize, that the place was sold out and made a good amount of money, because, he's got a big YouTube channel and he's got a lot of attention around him. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it was that big. But to say that you're bigger, that puts you over the top of guys like Gervonta Davis, Errol Spence Jr., Deontay Wilder, guys like Gennady Golovkin, guys that, really do fight for a living, who've trained their whole lives to fight, and whose events are really boxing matches where there's real suspense about, who's going to win and what's going to happen, versus it being kind of that shy sideshow freakish thing. But also there's the question of, longevity and whether or not Jake Paul is going to be able to do how many more fights that he's really going to be able to do this with. And, who knows? I mean, if the comedy act keeps going, it may keep going. My understanding is that he teased the world with a retirement already. But, it just kind of gets under my skin a little bit when he says that he's the biggest fighter in boxing when he's not really in boxing. I think that title should go to people, who are really in the ring, who are real serious boxers, not guys that are amateurs and who are creating an event. Because if that was the case, then, Mike Tyson could have, exhibition fights and he would be the biggest fighting boxer or in boxing. And I think this is kind of how this thing was birthed from Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself looking for a way to extend his career with the Conor McGregor fight. But, like I said, I don't want to come across as if, I don't see that there being any value in the Jake Paul fight. I mean, that for people want to see what people want to see. They want to see these special events, and, these guys are personalities. So if they want to see personalities fight, they want to see personalities fight. But to call yourself the biggest fighter name in boxing, I think that you should actually have to fight boxers, and you should be engaged for real in the sport that you're saying that you're the biggest at, and not kind of sit out to the side. Because if that was the case, there could be, it would just be a personality contest outside the ring, and nobody would ever have to get into tougher fights, which, honestly, boxing looks like it might be turning into a little bit. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.